Hello there, and welcome back to the railway. So starting off in today's video, I'm going to be showing you the progress that I've made with the Tudor village, starting off with the construction of the buildings that will be making up the village area. So the first kit that I started with, which you have seen in the last few images, was the double pack of the two Tudor buildings. So the first one, as you saw, is complete, and here is the construction of the second one. I'll show you the inside of it here as well, with then the pieces ready to make. It gives you two different options for the roofs of these two buildings. You can then see as well the top level now all glued on, as well as these fiddly railings in between the two fronts. So once those two buildings were complete, I then started work construction of the Hotel Wednesday. I don't have any progress pictures for this, just the finished model. And mine is not going to be called the Hotel Wednesday, it is instead going to be called the Castle Tower Hotel. The next building in the queue for construction was the number 1 Market Street timber framed building from Metcalfe. Unlike the instructions said, I decided not to put any displays right in front of the windows, and instead only had the displays on the back walls on the inside. So these displays here that you can see that they get you to make, I didn't make those because I thought it obscured the view quite a lot of the inside, so I wanted to have a much more open look to the shop, which you will see in the next image on screen. So you can see how much more open it is, and I think it does look a lot less cluttered. One thing with this building though, compared to the others, it does seem a little bit larger, and I was wondering if it seems out of scale, and I was wondering for your opinion on that when you look at this image here of all of them next to each other. As the windows on the Market Street building seem a lot bigger than on the other three buildings on the left of screen, and it also feels quite a lot taller than the others on the left that are 3 stories, and it doesn't quite seem like the levels line up. But anyway, another modification I've made to this kit is I haven't glued the side building to the kit, so I can move it around, have it separate. If ever I move the layout round, I can decide to have it in a different orientation, be it on the back side, the side where it's intended, or as indeed a completely separate building. So with all those buildings now completed, it's time for me to start progress on the wall that will run around the edge of the village. The first wall that I made was a modified 45-degree corner wall, as all of the walls that they give you turn inwards on themselves, but I wanted the wall to kind of turn outwards and go around the town that kind of in an outward way. So I needed to swap around which way the walls were on the former. So that's what you can see me doing here, is just cutting the taller section of wall that's going to be on the front, on the outside of the town, cutting that narrower so it fits on the inside as it is of the curve on the wall itself. So after I'd done the first half, it was then very easy then to just do the second half, now knowing all of the measurements that I needed. I also cut the inside of the wall, as you can see, the back half of the battlements, as otherwise they would have been too long as well. So I've also filled in the gaps either side where the shorter walls have now moved to the outside, or the outside of the curve, but the inside of the wall section itself. And after putting on the last layer of brickwork on the inside, you can then see I've cut the excess bits of brick paper off, and here is the finished wall. So you can see the difference. On the left hand side is the modified one, on the right is the unmodified, with the two different ways round it all they both go. It then means I can do different sections of walling like this and have zigzags effectively in the wall, and the Metcalfe kits are brilliant to do this with, as they are very customizable, as you've seen from this short section. The next wall I began progress on was again a custom build one. This was a complete custom build from scratch, as this was going to be the entrance way into the village area, with a wall that runs over the top, kind of like a bridge going over. So first things first was I got all the measurements done and cut out both sides using 2mm grey board sheets, and then used those as a template to cut out the outlines for the brick covering that would go around them. Once this was done, I then started the construction process, using again some more 2mm grey board to act as support struts going on the sides, as well as putting the layer of paving stones across the top of the span. Once that was all solid and dry, I could then attach the brickwork to either side, and then I had these two slots that then overhang the entranceway so I can have it flush cut on the opposite side of the wall. So there it is in its place, the section of wall that you've just seen me making. So here it is with some of the other walls in place, with the bridge going over the main road, as well as the new section of 45-degree wall that you saw me make earlier. I then got into quite a rhythm of making the wall sections, and you can see my workspace here with almost a production line of walls ready for assembly. The next custom section of wall used this template that I created here. This template was then transferred onto 1mm greyboard sheet. I then used that template to cut a sheet of 1mm paving. Once that was done, I then cut back some more of the greyboard, so it would then fit in some of these pre-built wall sections that I was going to incorporate into this section of wall. To begin the assembly of this section of wall, I first glued the paving sheet to the top of all four sections of pre-built wall. Two of them had already been glued together as a pair on the left, and the two on the right still yet to be glued, as I needed to make sure that the angle that I had the walls glued at matched the paving sheet, so I left those loose for a bit and then glued it after the paving sheet had dried. Once the top layer paving sheet was firm and glued in, I then attached the lower level support strut that I had made with the 1mm greyboard, and this slotted on top of some other bits of greyboard that I used as kind of locators for the height. So all of that section of support strut then was all at the same height, so it kept it a very sturdy build. Once all of that was dry, I then began work of cutting the back section of brick wallpaper to then cover up the back section of wall, and then once that was done, I then did it to the front sections as well. So once that section was finished with the construction, I then carved out the slot for it in the foam and pushed it in so it was then at the same height as all the other section of wall. I then used a level to make sure it was still level with the other side of the walls of the main castle section on the opposite side of the bridge. Another thing that I had done before putting these sections of wall in, though, was I had cut these 2mm sections of greyboard to go underneath the buildings and match the line where the wall went round. There are still two sections of battlements here that still need the other side of brickwork putting in, but I'll do that at a later date. So with all of the buildings and walls now in place for the Tudor village, all I need to do now is put some cobblestones in. So I'll show you how that's going. So I've now cut out all of these cobblestone sheets, so they all fit inside the walls all the way around like that. There are a few gaps, one main one being here and a little one here. Those will be covered up by the bits of scenery, so there's going to be some sort of fountain in the middle here, and then some stalls around this side here maybe. So I'm hoping those will cover that slight gap that is just there. And then round the back here, this being the more noticeable gap, I'm going to try and either put a little bit more cobblestone over the top of that gap, or put some crates or something in that area to try and hide it. But yes, that's how it's looking so far. All I need to do now is cut out where the buildings go, and then I'll glue these sheets onto the greyboard underneath, and then the greyboard underneath will then get glued onto the hillside. But what I won't do is I won't glue it to this piece of greyboard, because then it means it will lift off this entire level when I need to get into the tunnel for cleaning or access purposes. So that's my plan, that's what I'm going to carry on with now, and I'll show you how it's going in a minute. So I've just had another idea of how I can hide these gaps here and here, but I want your opinion. So the two solutions I gave you before was like trying to cover it with some scenery bits, either trying to put some more cobblestones over the top, or a third idea which I've had, tarmac sheets. My idea being is I could say cut a rectangle over both sides and have a bit of tarmac that fits that gap perfectly. So then it looks like there's been some problems with the cobblestones there and they've had to go in and repair it, but with tarmac because it's quicker, and that's maybe how they would have repaired it. That's just a quick thought I've had. Let me know down in the comments section below what you think of those ideas and which you think might be better. So that's all for the update on the village section in this video. There will be more progress coming up in other videos because there's some modifications I want to make over here. So my plan is to modify these two walls here to remove the inside wall, and then I'll have some steps that go up from this level onto the same level as the walkway around the top. I also still need to carve out these bits of cobblestones so it then goes down and matches the gradient, because you can tell that is nowhere near as wide as the gap I need. I have already cut the grey board underneath. I'll try and get a different angle of that to show you. So you can see the grey board here is lining up a lot more with the angle of the foam underneath, and that is the angle that I will then cut the cobblestones to match. But now that the village area is mostly complete with buildings and cobblestones and all the wall section, as I said, mostly done, I just thought I'd have a bit of fun putting some cars on and having a bit of a scene. So this car here, as you can see, parked in front of his shop. You've got a bit of a collision between these two with an ambulance and police car cordoning off the area. You've got a nice limousine style car there dropping someone very important off to the hotel, as well as then a bus dropping people off to the local shop. So now I will move on to the next section of video, which goes on about a new perspective for the layout. What you see before you is the internals of a spy camera pen. This was purchased off Amazon quite a while ago now, and I've been putting off doing anything with it due to hesitation and lack of confidence. But after spending some time reading over the instruction manual and watching Stephen from Elven Home, watching his video several times over, I then decided to take the plunge and begin the deconstruction of the pen. So first off, I removed the internal electronics from the shell that it was contained in. I then changed the angle of the camera so it was facing upright. I then cut away this section of plastic from the internal casing so that the camera could then slide through it. Once that was done, I then started the reconstruction of the pen using the top half of the pen cylinder case. I needed to do this so that the SD card would still be able to go into the end and not fall out. All I need to do now is add some blue tack or something to the back of the camera so it holds it in place and it doesn't wobble about. And you can just about see there the activation button just underneath the camera lens. So I've now used some blue tack to wrap around the camera lens itself just to solidify its position. This is the wagon that train cam will be running along with. I was then trying to think of some ways that I could have train cam on this wagon without having it permanently attached, and that's where this cardboard roll comes in, as it miraculously fits the train cam cylinder perfectly. All I will have to do with it is cut a notch so that the blue tack doesn't interfere with it, so it can then slide further into the cardboard roll, which I have now done, and as you can see I can now access the SD card port and charging port much easier as it's much closer to the end of the cardboard roll. In order to have train cam secure and stable on the wagon that I was going to be using for it, while also still being removable, I decided to use some grey board with a thickness of 1mm and then double layered it to make three thicker just over 2mm height sections, as it just then sat just slightly taller of the two frames that will go through the wagon. I then glued the cardboard roll on top of these sections, maintaining the gap so that it would slot into the position on the wagon, and waited for it to dry in this position so it dried without any movements to the gaps where the slots needed to be. So I've got my trusty Class 37, and now it's time for the first run of train cam, and let's see how it goes. When I look back at the footage, I realised that it had recorded it upside down. I don't know if there's anything I can change in the settings to do that, but all I've done is I've just rotated the video around, hence why the date and timestamp is at the top right hand corner of the screen instead of the bottom left. So you get a nice view here of the inside of the tunnel with some coaches stored in there temporarily. One thing as well that the train cam footage helps me to see is if there's any bumps in the track where the tracks aren't quite level with each other. I slowed down a bit going through that bridge there, as I wasn't quite sure whether the camera would clear the bridge with the clearance it had. It did just about, so that wasn't a problem. So I'm very pleased with how the train cam's first run went. Since then, I have had a couple of ideas of different ways to use the train cam. So I'll show you now some ideas that I have had. For those of you who might not know, Train Sim World 5 is a game where you can drive multiple different locomotives from be it first person or third person. So what I had the idea to do was go into the game and take some screenshots inside different locomotives that I have on my layout, and then I will show you what I did with them. I also have this view here from a Mark I first class compartment. So I used a photo editing app to digitally remove the windows so you can see straight through and then use them as almost a filter for sections of footage. So as you'll see from this section here, the potential with this technology is limitless. So I've used a class 37 cab from the internet. I don't quite like how the view of it is, so I prefer getting them off the train sim game. But you can see I've then used some filters to then make it look like it's raining outside, and it's worked quite well. And then as you see, when it goes into the tunnel, the cab, then I've made it so it goes darker, and then it'll go brighter again when it exits the tunnel, going through this side here now. As well as this, I added some audio from my collection. It takes a lot of time doing all these edits, and it takes up a lot of storage, so for the next few sections of footage it will just be an overlay of the cabs. So there's still plenty of editing and other bits I need to be doing to improve this even more, but just as a first go, seeing how it looks, I'm really happy with how it's gone. So that brings today's video to an end, so thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like the video and indeed subscribe to the channel. Don't forget, subscribing is free. If you've got any comments or suggestions about how you think I could improve the train camp or indeed the Tudor village, please do let me know down in the comments section below. So once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.